Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06. Thanks for tuning in here on a busy Tuesday morning. We're 3 weeks away from Election Day, and we got you covered. Coming up at 6:35, James Rosen, Newsmax senior White House correspondent. 7:05, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. He's got a new book. He'll be in studio with us to talk about it. 7:35, Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General of Virginia. And then at 8:35, Rodney Scott, former U.S. Border Patrol Chief. That's a loaded slate. Thank God I've got Julie Gunlock to help me through it. Good morning, Julie. I don't know why that's funny. You'll remember Kamala Harris over the weekend on the stump. She's got a brand new line of attack against Donald Trump.
He's not being transparent with the voters. He's not being transparent. So check this out. He refuses to release his medical records. I've done it. Every other presidential candidate in modern era has done it.
Now, this is the woman who actively covered up the mental and physical decline of Joe Biden right before our eyes, and now they're attempting this. And apparently, of course, the media is dutifully picking up the narrative and running with it. But can you the audacity?
Absolute audacity.
The only way you have the audacity and the chutzpah to do this is because you know you've got the media in your back pocket, and they're going to go to whatever length to help you with your propaganda effort here.
Let's not forget this summer. I mean, she was in full defend Biden mode.
Yeah.
She was saying, and this was just a few months ago, she was saying he's extraordinarily strong. He's so smart and loyal to the American people. She defended him. She denied that there was cognitive decline. In fact, she'd say things like, he's running the staff in circles. We can hardly, that was also Karine Jean-Pierre. But these people completely misled the American public. And for her now to stand there and have the nerve to talk about transparency and have the nerve to say that Donald Trump needs to release some sort of further medical records.
Right.
It is. I can hardly believe it.
It renders one speechless.
It does.
But as I said, the real story here is the media dutifully picking up the job as propaganda to be able to push this narrative. I mean, it is a wonder that Republicans ever win. When you see how the incredibly well-financed legacy corporate media does the job for these people.
Yes.
So Kamala says that, I think, on Saturday about medical records. And then immediately, Sunday morning, Kristen Welker has the Speaker of the House on. And there's a lot going on in our country, but apparently this is the most important thing to talk about.
Speaker,
That's what people are going to vote on.
Just to be very clear, he hasn't released all of his medical records. He released 2 letters. Should he release the results of the cognitive test?
It's unnecessary. He's on display every minute.
So it's unnecessary. You concede that he didn't release his medical records?
You like that? You concede.
Yes, you
concede
exactly.
that he's right. Exactly. And she even leans forward and puts her hand out. So we got you on this then.
Yes.
Want to know things like his cholesterol level, whether he's dealing with any issue that we may not know about, if he's going to be commander-in-chief. And he also said he would release cognitive tests.
Listen to your question.
Should he release that?
The American people... Kristen, the American people don't care about the cholesterol level of Donald Trump. They care about the cost of living and the fact.
I love this. Is the second time in the same morning that a Republican has to look at the interlocutor on a Sunday show and say, "Listen to yourself.
Listen to you." It was just missing that Peter Brady sort of voice crack, which would have made it more charming. But honestly, these people, the American public, saw you, Kristen Welker, ignore Biden's very clear cognitive decline, smear people who suggested there was a problem, and now you're concerned about, wait for it, cholesterol.
The cholesterol levels of Donald Trump. Well, you would think that would be a bridge too far, what Kristen Welker did on Meet the Press, but CBS News apparently decides, no, you know what? That's not good enough. We got to do more. So yesterday, CBS News, more than 230 doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals. By the way, healthcare professionals, like, where do you work? I work at a hospital. What do you do? I'm the janitor. Oh, you're good.
Right.
You're a healthcare, but you sign this.
Yeah. Let's also not forget that where the medical community is right now. They're the ones who were super okay with shutting everything down during COVID, and they're currently okay with transing kids. So I'm not sure the medical community is exactly fair on these issues.
They could only find 230 of them, which is kind of shocking considering that's what that amounts to like 4 per state. 230 doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals are calling on former President Donald Trump to release his medical records, arguing that he should be transparent about his health, quote, given his advancing age, unquote.
Yes, these same 230 healthcare providers, whatever that is, were silent on Joe Biden's cognitive.
They were silent on Joe Biden, or if anything, they said, look sharp as a tack to me.
Yeah.
And, by the way, you're right. I mean, these are the people not just who said that you have to put a mask on your two-year-old to protect them from a virus where there was no indication worldwide that anyone younger than 30 died from the virus.
Where were these people when people were dying alone without their families in hospitals, right? I don't give a crap what these people have to say.
Yeah, these are the same 230 people who told you that ivermectin, which has been a safe drug on the market for decades for antiviral purposes and were used as a preemptive use for anyone who traveled overseas where they might catch malaria, they then told you that it was really horse paste and it would kill you if you took it again. I just saw a doctor over the weekend and talking about a couple of things. I suggest ivermectin. I said, what? What are you talking about? I'm not a horse. No, that's fine.
Wow.
It's actually very safe. Everything's good.
They're willing to
Ivermectin's a great drug, you see. Those are the 230 healthcare professionals that now demand that Donald Trump. But the good news is
we stopped listening to you a long time ago.
No one buys it.
Yeah,
and
no
it's
one cares.
their own fault, by the way. Scott Jennings on CNN taking up the issue of the 230 doctors and the newfound focus on a presidential candidate's health.
If I were Harris, I wouldn't be leaning too heavily into who's hiding what kind of medical conditions of people who are or want to be the president, given her role in lying about the condition of Joe Biden for the last 4 years. That's number one. Number two, I don't think this works for her. I think I'm back in the same bucket I was earlier. You're not selling your own candidacy.
Yeah.
You're punching Donald Trump in the same way every other Democrat we've ever heard from for the last 8-9 years has punched this guy.
This is the most brilliant option. Scott Jennings is absolutely my hero these days.
I know.
He's so good
great.
on CNN, and I can't wait to see where his career takes off in this world. But that's the most important point. You now sound like every single person we've heard for 10 years about Donald Trump, and they have been so extreme and so out of control and so vitriolic that none of it matters. Like, what can they say about him now?
The Democrats are literally throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks.
But they've already thrown all the pasta against the wall.
They're just going back to the pot.
Yeah. How long are we going to keep this analogy up? That's good. I like it. Yeah, that is the key here, that the Vice President of the United States making a case for her landmark glass ceiling shattering, transcendent political ascension to the White House. 3 weeks before the election, a woman who said we need a new generation of leaders, we need to turn the page, we're going to move on and bring all of this new energy and dynamism to American politics. She has been reduced to this.
Here's the thing. It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on?
I mean, we report, you decide. Is that where if you're Kamala Harris, is this where you want to be and what you want to be talking about 3 weeks before election day?
She is not fooling anyone. She really isn't.
It is. In a moment, you'll hear her latest effort to try to win black votes because they are hemorrhaging black votes. At the moment, she is poised to have the worst performance as a Democrat candidate for president with black voters since John Kennedy. And you'll hear her new plan to win black voters in a moment. First, though, at 6:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
And sometimes there's a trend line that I never noticed before and make me go, whoa. This is one of them, all right? This is the Democratic margin among black men under the age of 45 in presidential elections. You go back to November of 2012, what do you see? You see Obama by 81. Clinton only won him by 63. Then we're all the way down to Biden last time around by 53. A tremendous drop already. And then you take a look at the average of the most recent polls, and Kamala Harris is up by only 41 points. That is about half the margin that Obama won them by back in November of 2012. And this, I think, is, when Barack Obama goes in last week when he was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, essentially talking to young black men, he made it seem like it was a Kamala Harris specific problem. This is part of a long-standing trend of young black men moving away from the Democratic Party, and Kamala Harris.
It's a great point there made by Harry Enton over there at CNN, who's actually been doing some pretty good statistical analysis and polling data. They went on to look at black women as well. She's doing better with black women, but again, the trend line from Obama to now, the trend line, she is now, Obama won the black male vote under the age of 45 by 81 points. She's now winning it by 41 points. Devastating. There's two ways to look at this. Kamala Harris is doing worse, as I just said, as any Democrat candidate since 1960. That's the narrative you're hearing on cable news. I would flip that narrative and say, guess what? Donald Trump is doing better than any Republican candidate with black men since 1960. And this is after calling him a Klansman, after calling him a white nationalist, after calling him Hitler, after calling him the second coming of, Jefferson Davis. And he's still overcome all of that, and he's actually doing better than any other Republican before him.
There is so little coverage of how Kamala destroyed black men in California. By prosecuting them. In some cases, these men were let out after they were, they were innocent, and they've actually come out publicly on that.
And that's a thing, but more importantly, I think, in terms of how Kamala Harris is not doing well, is that most young black men under the age of 45 are recognizing they've been lied to by this party.
Yes.
They've been lied to and exploited. And every single promise that has been made to them has kept them in the same straits that they've been in for decades. And as Donald Trump said famously 8 years ago in Detroit, what do you got to lose?
Right.
You've been voting Democrat, and look around you.
Right.
Give me a chance. So, of course, they dispatched Barack Obama to give a speech in Pittsburgh, as was already referenced earlier.
Emerges from his billionaire lair to finger wag.
And he starts lecturing black men about, you got to get out there and vote.
We had not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers.
With the brothers. So, in other words, in true sanctimonious professorial Obama style, he wants to deliver a message, and the only way he can do it is to lecture, shame, and guilt you and say, you're not coming out to vote for Kamala Harris because you hate women.
Yeah, and look, I have to say, within the black community, record low unemployment among African Americans during the Trump administration, higher wages, job growth, economic health. I mean, they act like they all have amnesia, that black Americans aren't remembering that they were much better off under Trump.
Yeah.
And then they come out and he finger wags.
Right.
And also calls them sexist. And I have to say, I heard a lot of Michelle Obama in that lecture, pronounced with the brothers, right? That we're so ashamed of you.
Yeah, well, that's just his Hawaiian dialect there peeking through. All right, so the Kamala Harris campaign has a two-pronged approach to appeal to black men. First, she's going to be doing a town hall with a Charlemagne the God, who is a radio host, podcaster, he's syndicated nationally, and he appeals to a predominantly urban African-American audience. But politically, he's been rather skeptical, actually, of Kamala Harris and such. But I'm sure he'll be very generous to her, because when push comes to shove, he's going to come down on the side of the Democrats.
He's asked some challenging questions, though, in the past.
But secondly, here's the agenda for black men. So Kamala Harris, 3 weeks before the election, releases an agenda for black men. I assure you, if they weren't worried over there about the black vote, they would not be putting out an agenda for black men. But listen to it. Number one, provide 1 million loans that are fully forgivable to black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. So number one, we're going to do 1 million loans at the federal level, but only for black people, which I'm pretty sure is against federal law.
That is against the 14th Amendment.
But secondly, don't you love a loan that's fully forgivable? There's another word for that. So I'm going to give you a loan, but you don't ever have to pay me back, and there will be no questions asked. That's a bribe. That's free money.
That's right.
Is what that is.
And that's exactly where they are right now.
Number 2, championing education, training, and mentorship programs that help black men get good-paying jobs in high-demand industries. Isn't this the kind of thing they've been saying they've been doing since Lyndon Johnson?
Yeah.
Number 3, supporting a regulatory framework for cryptocurrency and other digital assets so black men who invest in and own these assets are protected.
What?
I mean, suddenly we're protecting investments in cryptocurrency, but
only black people.
If you've got the right color skin.
Oh my gosh.
Launching a national health equity initiative focused on black men that address sickle cell disease, diabetes, mental health, prostate cancer. And number 5, legalizing recreational marijuana and creating opportunities for. Is there anything more racist?
Oh.
We got to get more black votes, so let's give them pot.
Wow.
That's where they are. And, well, you know what? It might work. 623.
Now
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Like a parasitic virus that you might not really want initially, but you can't do without eventually. It's O'Connor and Company. Heard every day here at 5 a.m. till 9 a.m. It's the only way to start your day. It's an addiction of sorts. You rely on it. It's like, oh, I resist this thing. I don't. But you know what? It's actually my friend. I need it in my life.
Okay.
It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday morning. Coming up at 7:05, Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, has a new book, and he'll be in studio to talk about it. See, he can't stay away. 7:35, Ken Cuccinelli, former Homeland Security as well as former Attorney General of Virginia, talk about the DOJ move against Glenn Youngkin. And then at 8:35, Rodney Scott, former Border Patrol Chief. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
And joining us right now is James Rosen. He, of course, the senior White House correspondent for Newsmax. Good morning, James.
Good morning to Larry and Julie, respectively, my favorite, what was it, parasitic virus and unshakable addiction.
Yeah, it's not harmful or anything, and you can't do without it. Hey, James, listen, I know you're a serious political reporter, and you like to cover, the ins and outs of policy and as well as political intrigue. I hate to drag you into the world we like to live in, which is really best described as Real Housewives of Pennsylvania Avenue. But we hear there's a lot of dirt going on right now between the Biden team in the White House and the Kamala Harris campaign. There's got to be some bitterness there. How else would you explain Joe Biden completely submarining and undermining Kamala Harris's narrative last week on the hurricane and on Ron DeSantis? I mean, that was deliberate, wasn't it?
He has his personal number.
Bring the tea, James.
Well, it's interesting because some of the same commentators who have been vocal in describing President Biden's mental decline or cognitive difficulties are now attributing to him great purpose and cunning and a forethought in how he comports himself vis-a-vis the news media and the cycles that should properly belong to the Democratic nominee, his vice president. I'm not sure we can attribute that kind of cunning and a forethought to him.
Well, but we can to Jill, can't we?
Well, perhaps to staff.
The staff. All right, go.
Well,
okay, but let me say simply, Julie, that these kinds of tensions are historically present when you see a vice president running to succeed an incumbent president. And those of us with long memories will recall how there was tension between Bill Clinton and his staff and Al Gore and his in the year 2000 as Gore sought to distance himself from the Lewinsky-tarred Clinton and so forth, and the Clinton people resented that and so on.
Yeah, that's true, Julie. I forgot how Bill Clinton was shoved aside and not allowed to run for re-election. And just
collected 14 million votes. Yeah,
wait a second. Maybe there's a slight difference in this scenario.
Well, it's interesting,
though.
This
is historically unique, but these tensions are endemic. And on one of the occasions where the vice president's team was heard complaining that President Biden had scheduled a media event or an appearance of his own at a time that was inopportune for the campaign, it had to do with alerting the American people, updating the American people on the status of the hurricanes. And that is a kind of exigent situation which probably shouldn't be pegged to some campaign consideration somewhere else. So I think too much is made of this. I think it's fun for, as you say, for where we live, which is Beltway chattering, but I don't think there's a single voter out there, as we are now in the final 3 weeks of this thing, who's going to be citing tension between the Biden and Harris staffs as a motivator to go vote on any particular issue.
Well, I want to keep this going because this is what I enjoy. But but James, wasn't it kind of weird how Kamala Harris, who has not been interested in hurricane disaster relief or sort of what FEMA's doing, she hasn't really gotten involved in her 4 years in the White House in disaster relief. And suddenly, she's sort of doing this cosplay thing where she's getting briefings from FEMA. She's, taking phone calls always when a camera is running, is rolling. I mean, did that kind of ruffle feathers that she was sort of acting like the president when it came to the hurricane relief? And so is that why Joe Biden just sort of stepped it up a little?
I think the adults on both sides recognize the imperatives of the environment in which they operate, which is a media-driven environment in which when something tremendous and cataclysmic like this pair of storms hits a large segment of the American population, our leaders are expected to respond and to be seen as not only empathetic but engaged. And certainly in a campaign setting, no major party nominee could afford to appear anything else. And so I think the adults, again, in the Biden operation recognized that this was going to be something she would have to do to some extent. I find the entire exercise unnecessary and perhaps even wasteful of the time of the chief executive / commander in chief. This is why you hire a FEMA administrator.
Right,
this is why you have tens of thousands of employees devoted to disaster response, when we all know that the President of the United States, generally speaking, is either, until very recently, a politician, a general, or now more recently a businessman. We don't expect them to know about storm dynamics and storm responses. They hire experts for this sort of thing, and they should be focused on the economy and diplomacy and war and peace and other sort of presidential matters, if you ask me. It's the same with the school shootings. Why has it become an imperative of the modern presidency that if a certain mathematical number of shooting victims is reached in another one of these atrocities around the country, we expect the president to serve as consoler-in-chief and physically descend on the place? I just don't understand these kind of imperatives. They seem infotainment driven to me, and I await the President of the United States, who's going to have the intestinal fortitude to say, I don't need to show up at every shooting site or every disaster zone. This is why I hire competent people to deal with specific issues. I'm going to be your President of the United States, which is what you elected me to do. And I guess, close that out by saying to you and to our audience that if elected, I would serve.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, Mr. Rosen, your impassioned lamentation that I, for the most part, agree with. Number one, we're in the business of shallow infotainment here, so watch your lip.
Yeah, you take your kale over there. We're having bonbons over here.
Secondly, though, I would agree with you 100%. Were it not for living through the outrageous politicization of Hurricane Katrina used as a weapon against George W. Bush. And let's be clear, when a president comes out and bites his lip and starts drawing tears in the reflection of a horrific school shooting, they're usually doing it to then push an agenda for political purposes to either undermine the Second Amendment or, more realistically, to raise more money from gun control groups. So I hate to be so cynical, but that's the reality, and
it's true. You raise a great point, Larry, which is these performances are not simply performative; they do serve certain organizational goals.
Absolutely.
But I would myself, as a citizen, not just as a reporter, want to see our president devoting their time more to the presidency and not to this kind of, to them to go get your Glenn Youngkin style vest and listen to FEMA. It just seems. It seems like theater to me rather than the administering of the executive branch.
James Rosen, senior White House correspondent as Newsmax. We always appreciate our regular conversations with you, sir.
Thank you. I love the virus. I can't get enough of it.
Hey, it was a parasite. Let's be clear. But
right.
It's similar.
Miss anything? Don't worry. We've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
Let's look at Kamala Harris's last 24 hours. First, of course, she was just credibly accused of plagiarism, although when you really think about it, plagiarism is really what can be stealing from what has been. So it's not that big a deal. But then she decided to do her patented word salad.
And now, deep thoughts.
This time with a conversation with Roland Martin. By the way, if she's looking to appeal to young, black, straight men, I don't know if sitting with Roland Martin is necessarily
or normal
the
people.
solution. But they started talking for some reason about stars and constellations.
There's this whole. I talked with somebody once who said, if you just look at where the stars are in the sky, don't look at them as just random things. If you just look at them as points. Look at the constellation. What does it show you? So you just outlined it, Roland. What does it show you?
And now, deep thoughts.
Yeah.
Can you imagine 4 years of that?
No, I cannot.
What?
Well,
people.
but how about that? So that's about the stars. What about when you actually talk about geopolitical trends around the world and what she might do with policy internationally?
The median age on the continent is 19. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be on the continent of Africa. That is so, so, so exciting. If we see it in terms of global policy, for the opportunity it presents to invest in partnership and to do the work that is about understanding the mutual benefit.
And now, deep thoughts.
I'm torn because I don't want her to be president or go anywhere near the White House. But, God, our job would be so easy every morning, wouldn't it?
God,
although she'd also outlaw what we do. So I guess maybe we should.
Yeah.
And finally, let's not forget this weekend at a church.
Because what we see is so hard to see that we lose faith or a vision of those things we cannot see but must know.
And now, deep thoughts.
No wonder she plagiarized. If she tries to come up with something herself, she sounds like a moron. It's 6:52, Julie.